6:45 now. It is Thursday, and this is 1320 WILS. Well, the U.S. Justice Department now looking into what's happening in Chicago. The police there, if they're violating civil rights. As today, the calls for the mayor to resign are growing louder and louder in Chicago. Let's talk about exactly what's happening over there. Scott Palmer is an attorney who deals a defense attorney himself. ScottPalmerLaw.com. Hey, Scott, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and you're a defense attorney. Sorry, you're probably on the other side of the police department usually. When you see the videos, what have your thoughts been? Do you think there's a serious problem in Chicago?
There's been a serious problem in Chicago for many years, from what I understand. I've got some colleagues that do civil rights plaintiff work in Chicago, and this has been going on for years. Chicago Police Department has been known to be paying out just millions and millions of dollars in settlements over the years that I know about. So this is not a big shock, but that video that surfaced on the anniversary, I believe, of the death of that child was just shocking. 16 shots from that distance. When
he's on the ground. Here's my question, Scott. Why would a police department allow a rogue cop like that to stay on board? Why would they protect him?
I can't understand why this was not news when it happened, and why he was allowed to have that long of a time between the shooting and actual charges being filed. I'm perplexed by that as well. I think that may be part of the problem in Chicago, that things like this that in any other jurisdiction would have gone. It would have been in the media immediately. That sort of kind of went underneath the radar for so long in Chicago. I don't know if that's part of the systematic problem that they're complaining about in the streets.
Right. But, I'm curious though, when you see protests and say, "Look, this is the issue with police departments across the country," are you saying that's inaccurate? That this is actually a very small number that we're looking at these kinds of issues?
Well, these issues, as over the past year and a half, we've become full front under the mainstream media. We're seeing more and more police shootings. The fact that Chicago is seeing a kind of a rash of them in the recent weeks, but these are historical. Both of these shootings that I think that have come up out of in the press happened months and months ago. So I'm not sure why they took so long. It's kind of disturbing that the city of Chicago allowed this to kind of they investigated it, but why it only is now why people are protesting now and calling for the mayor and obviously the police commissioner. It's very disturbing. But Chicago
Tell me this, Scott. How does it work? If you've got a police officer that's acting out and other officers are aware of it, who's the one that steps in and confronts the problem?
Normally, the police department will police itself. The internal affairs investigators will obviously put somebody on administrative leave and suspend them.
And he was put on that, wasn't he? I think he was on desk duty, something like that.
I imagine he was. I don't know the particulars, but I can't imagine that he would have not put on some normal administrative leave after a shooting, and then usually they don't have contact with the public and that type of thing for a certain period of time until charges are officially filed. Of course, this man was actually charged with murder, and looks like he's been indicted by the grand jury. So this is also atypical. We don't see a lot of officers involved shootings actually indicted. In Texas, where I'm practicing, more and more officers are starting to get indicted for these types of offenses because the public is just tired of seeing regular people being shot and killed, and officers just being allowed to, get off of it.
So you're saying it's internal affairs that's who basically steps in. They're the authority in these cases.
Generally, it starts with internal affairs. Sometimes there's an independent investigator that's assigned that sort of acts outside of internal affairs that deals with civil rights violations, and they will do sort of an independent, kind of a clean inspection of all the evidence, and then they'll refer the case to the district attorney's office.
Okay.
And in Illinois, they have a different process than I'm used to. The state prosecuting attorney's office handles most of that, and you would think that they would have stepped in really early in this situation because of the nature of the way this poor kid was shot down in the middle of the street at such a long distance too.
Now, one last thing, when the police officers that are working with them, obviously there were others there on the scene. What pressure are they under to basically? It looks like in this case there was a cover-up to change the story and to let him go on a case like this.
Well, that's been a problem for decades. Police officers standing with each other and keeping the story tight between themselves and covering up for their officers. The problem is that videotape these days will generally unravel the cover-up, and you can only go so far with that. And officers want to make sure that they don't get caught up in that web, and then they get actually fired for actually lying about trying to cover for their brother. Mm-hmm. So these days, with video being so prominent and necessary in prosecutions, these officers have to be very careful on which side they're going to kind of fall on, whether they're going to help their friend or they're going to say, this was a bad shooting and we need to stand up for what's right.
Yeah, would all the other fellow officers turn on them if they're the ones to take that position?
Sometimes, they call it the thin blue line, and that's the fraternity that the police officers, are members of, that you're not supposed to, tell on your brother. You're supposed to stick with him, thick and thin. But I don't know. These days, I think that's sort of a fine line, because everybody's accountable for how they perceive a situation and how they react to it. Right. And trying to cover up for one of your own that's done wrong is not much of a cover-up. It's not going to help you advance your career. You're going to probably be indicted for some sort of obstruction of justice, and nobody wants to be part of that indictment either. Defense attorney Scott Palmer, scottpalmerlaw.com down in Texas. Scott, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. In 60 seconds, we'll talk about the latest controversy with the EAA.